And once again, we are returned to day. Well, we aren't returned. We kind of are returned. Well, the next day of the 100 Days of Narration Challenge, day 54 of this 100 Days of Narration Challenge. Wow, yesterday was an interesting read. My Immortal. Let's never speak about that ever again. But for today's book, I have decided to read a book by the most infamous of game designers ever, with an ego the size of a planet. You may have heard me do a reading of this guy's blog entries before. I should really be reading his blog entries instead, but sorry, God, throat is itchy. But yes, today's book is going to be Inspiration for the Interactive Generation by Matt Dickie. Yes, and if you haven't heard about this guy before, well, let me read out the back cover blurb, and you can guess at how grand and egotistical and a high opinion he has of himself. The first line of this back cover is a quote. If I felt like the most powerful game developer in the world, and would never again think of myself as anything less. And then we have a description about the actual content. Gaming's most outspoken character finally speaks out about himself. For almost a decade, Matt Dickie electrified the games industry with his prolific output. He used unconventional methods to create unconventional games and redefined what could be achieved by one man. Audiences responded accordingly and ensured his underground rumblings would resonate around the world. For the first time ever, the true story behind that fascinating period is documented in this comprehensive book. In his own words, Matt takes us on an emotional journey from the childhood dream to the adult that lived it out. Along the way, we learn about the life experiences that shaped his character and fueled his resolve. And we get the final word on why it had to come to an end. You've played the games behind the life. Now, get acquainted with the life behind the games. So yeah, he has a very high opinion of himself. If you've never heard of M. Dickie, I do not blame you. He's pretty popular amongst the Retsu Thrash crowd, but nobody really knows what he does or what he did until it was highlighted by Retsu Thrash. So, you know. But I'm going to read from a page where he actually goes on into why he is so excellent, why he is so wonderfully good. So we're going to read just 4 pages from this, or however long this section is. It's reading page 78, and reading, I guess, for 4 pages, so that's like until page 81 or so. So let's do that. Okay. I make games, and mdickie.com is where you'll find information about them. People usually feel the need to add bells and whistles when the work doesn't speak for them. When the work doesn't speak for itself. Fortunately, mine always did. So I never had to worry about convincing people to enter my lair. I must have been doing something right, because within a couple of months of launching my own site, it was crowned Reader Site of the Month in the UK's very own PC format magazine. It was the best start I could have possibly hoped for. The piece even included an interview with me that dominated the rest of the page. So, in addition to getting my web address out there, I also got to wax lyrical about my unusual methods and my open door policy to fans. Seeing my name in print gave me a taste for the spotlight that would be hard to shake over the months that followed. I was making game development look easy, and journalists within the industry were queuing up to hear my story. One particularly satisfying encounter was with the popular teletext magazine Digitizer. In the summer before my big breakthrough, I had written in as a mere player to reprimand the editor for belittling the wrestling genre. Although I was perfectly polite and articulate, my letter was printed on screen and ridiculed, along with a childish stab at the name Dickie. Just a few months later, that very publication had my name emblazoned all over a lead story that hailed my work as an exciting new force in game development. I'm not sure if the editor ever made a connection between the two incidents, but I went on to enjoy a productive relationship with them, appearing several more times before Digitizer eventually folded, so I suspected not. I was also becoming a victim of my own success at this stage. Encouraged by my progress, several magazines were hosting competitions to find homemade games created in products like Div Games Studio. However, each and every one was a debacle of some description. I knew from experience because I smugly entered them all. A magazine called PC Gamer ran that boasted of sending the winner to the E3 convention in the States. Unfortunately, there were so few entries that I couldn't even be declared the winner by default because there was nothing to compare my creation to. There were already doubts about my eligibility. I can't say that word properly. About my eligibility for such a competition, and an effortless victory would have aroused suspicion even more. Similarly, PC Format hosted a competition to find the best modification of a game called Xenon that the Bitmap brothers had provided as a C++ code. There was an error with the code that only I had the initiative to fix. And so again, mine was the only entry, prompting the organizers to quietly forget the whole thing instead of crowning a winner. One publication after another was falling prey to the curse of getting involved in independent game development, and it slowly started to disappear from their pages in the months that followed. Unperturbed, I continued to seek out accolades of my own making. By the time 2001 rolled around, I was finally at work on a long-anticipated follow-up to the Stunt Challenge game that started it all. Big Bumps, as it would now be called, was a much more professional outing that featured a variety of characters to play as and locations to visit. The stunt possibilities expanded accordingly and made for a more sophisticated gaming experience, albeit one that risked tinkering with the winning formula just a tad too much. I'll try that one again. Albeit one that risked tinkering with the winning formula a tad too much. Your high scores were even saved to memory this time, so you could enjoy charting your own progress. After months of amateurish projects, I felt like I had finally made my first proper game. Actually, he said, I felt like I had finally made first proper game. I'm pretty sure that's meant to be my, but whatever, we can deal with it. My enthusiasm was shared by a wrestling merchandise store that wanted to sponsor the projects. It was just project. One project, not projects. It was a charming family business called Rumble Time, managed by a kindly older lady whose son happened to be a fan of my work. They wanted to know what I would like in return for featuring their logo in the game, thereby directing my wrestling-obsessed web audience to their site. They assumed I would quote a monetary amount and were pleasantly surprised when I showed more interest in their stock. I had visions of owning a genuine wrestling belt resplendent in leather and gold, and seized the opportunity to earn one. It would be the closest thing to winning one. They gladly obliged and dispatched a WCW United States Championship belt to me as payment. Looking at it rationally, it wasn't a smart move because I could have probably bought several such belts with a cash sum. However, as my sole reward, the belt stands as a symbol of the first time my games were ever valuable, and I treasure it as such to this day. I'm looking at it right now as I write this very sentence. Money would have just been a number in the bank that had long since disappeared. Evidently, I wasn't in this for the money. And I said I would read 4 pages. That was 3, and unfortunately there isn't a page 81. Well, there's a page 81, but it's not actually a real page. It's a screenshot. Oh, dear Lord. It's a screenshot of his article in PC Gallery. I'll see if I can read it because the font is tiny. The gallery. Another month, another worried soul unleashing their work for your delectation. Don't be too harsh on them now. That's a high praise. Reader's Sight of the Month. I've overestimated myself. I cannot read this. The font is too tiny. Our ever-productive readership is busting into new facets of the creative spectrum. I can actually read the question. I can read the questions. Who are you, and what do you think you're doing here? I'm Matt Dickie, a student at Satford University. No, not happening. The font is really amazingly tiny, and the only way I'm going to be reading that is if there's a... Is there any kind of zoom? Oh, here we go. Zoom in. Duh. It was right there all along. Some more. Okay, zoomed in. This month, PCF gives you a swift sidestep, dashes behind you, pretends to be invisible, and then thrusts something other than a website at you. Shocked? Our ever-productive readership is busting into new facets of creative spectrum, including, it seems, programming. So, without further ado, let's meet this month's lucky battery exhibitor? Whatever. Battery exhibitor Matt Dickie. Okay. And we get questions and answers. Who are you and what do you think you're doing here? I'm Matt Dickie, a student at Salford University studying computer and video games. I'm pioneering a fresh approach to games production and want to let people know about it. And then we get back to the interview again. Programming, eh? How did you get into that? It all started with me making games for my own entertainment. My brother and I would always make our own board games, card games, outdoor games, and so on. And the next logical leap for this creativity was computer games. So I got hold of a computer and gradually tracked down all the software that I needed to be creative. From art to programming, I taught myself as much as I could about each area, knowing full well that it would eventually give me unparalleled creative freedom. Okay, and how do you feel about your programming accomplishments? I'm proud of the way I gradually managed to teach myself. Most people who enter games making want to make something great right away. Making want to make something great straight away and tend to wait until they have the skills to do that. Invariably, they end up waiting forever. So I embraced everything I learned and applied it to the fullest. During my A-levels, the day we learned an if statement, I made 5 unique text games, one of which is still being passed around through email to this day, while every other student was sulking in their inability to do graphics. That kind of resourcefulness, making something out of nothing, is one of my greatest assets. And the wrestling influence? The WWF is just such good subject matter at the moment. It was my intention to tap into its huge fan base to kickstart my popularity. I approached a wrestling website called... I can't read that. That's the Warzone, www.thawarzone.cjb.net. Wow, okay. With a game I had made about the Hardy Boys. They accepted it immediately and made it available to their thousands of visitors. It was popular because I offered them a rare combination: a wrestling fan who could make games. I knew what people wanted and gave it to them. I'm looking at some of these screenshots right now, and it's not too terrible, I guess, for amateur. But yeah, some of these captions like backgrounds from Double Dragon and a bearded fella lying in a pool of blood. Nice. Wait, he made a Double Dragon port or something? I don't know. Copyright? No. That's Ricky Balboa. His mate? Apparently that's named The Ruck. Harm. And another screenshot, Matt Dickie making oversized men beating 7 shades out of each other. Cool. Okay, alright. Okay, that's some very silly stuff over there. And more questions. When did your website come into the equation? I had always intended to create a website, but I decided to establish myself first through other sites, like the Warzone. When I had enough people interested in what I was doing, I launched my site, mdickie.com. Most game makers create their own site to convince themselves that they have an audience, whereas I got the audience first, then gave it the site that they wanted. And last question, what do you plan to do next? I'm having great success with my request-led approach. I let the people who play my games have a massive influence. From character design to ideas, you can be a part of the creative process. It's a prime source of originality that the industry seems to have ignored. I would like to transfer as much of this as possible to the mainstream because anyone who plays games wants to make games. I'm somewhere in between. And that was his interview with, what magazine was this again? Sorry, PC Format. Yeah. Yeah, I think he made a bigger deal of this than it was absolutely necessary. So, yeah, that was a couple of pages from Inspiration for the Interactive Generation by Matt Dickie. Day 54 of the 100 Days of Narration down. I forgot to mention Shitlit Week. This is Shitlit Week. And that was certainly an interesting bit of egotism right there. Egotism? One of those two. One of those two pronunciations. I hope you enjoyed that little insight into Matt Dickie's life and his meanderings. And yeah, I will see you here again tomorrow for the last day of Shitlit Week, where we will read... Oh, I won't give it away. But I think you can tell what I'm going to read tomorrow because I've done all the popular ones so far. Several of the popular ones so far. So this last one is going to be what you think it is, unless it isn't. No, whatever. See you then.